There are 5 crops you can grow that leave the humble potato standing, and almost no one grows a single one of them. And the last one on my list, the one I am saving for you, is so generous and so bomb-proof that gardeners call it the one crop to grow if the world falls apart. Stay with me for that, because it is the real payoff. But first, look at what most folk are doing right now. They are breaking their backs over potatoes, digging the trenches, hilling the soil, spraying for blight, lifting the whole crop before the first frost, and then losing half of it to rot in a dark shed by February. It does not have to be that way. There are roots you can plant once and dig for years, roots that shrug off disease, roots that store themselves in the cold ground and wait for you. You have just never been told their names. So here is the flip. For the best part of 100 years you have been told the potato is the king of the vegetable patch, the one reliable thing, the crop that feeds a family. And it is a fine plant, but it is a needy one, and it is far from the best. We did not lose these 5 other roots because they failed us. We lost them because they went out of fashion, and fashion has a short memory. Our grandparents grew things we have been taught to forget. My name is Malcolm Ashby, and I have spent my life growing the crops most folk have never heard of. So hear me on one thing. Never plant a root you cannot name for certain, because a few wild lookalikes will make you poorly. If you love the idea of a crop you plant once and dig up for years, do give this a subscribe. It is free and it helps me keep making these. Right, let us start at number 5. Number 5 is a plant called skirret, and I would wager you have never once heard the word. Say it with me, skirret. It is an old European root vegetable, a perennial, which means you plant it and it comes back year after year without you lifting a finger to sow it again. Hundreds of years ago, it sat on the tables of kings. The Emperor Tiberius, they say, was so fond of it he demanded it as tribute. It was a common sight in cottage gardens all across these islands, prized for a taste that folk described as sweeter and finer than any parsnip. Your great-grandmother might have grown it and never made a fuss about it, because to her it was simply dinner. And then the potato arrived from the New World, cheap and easy and quick, and skirret was elbowed off the plate and forgotten. So why does no one grow it now? Simple. You cannot buy it in a shop, so nobody thinks to ask for it. It slipped out of the seed catalogues, and a plant that is not in the catalogue may as well not exist. But here is where it beats the potato. Skirret is a true perennial. You dig up a clump of sweet white roots in the autumn, you take what you need for the kitchen, and you tuck a few of the smaller crowns straight back into the soil. That is your crop for next year, already planted, no seed to buy, no trench to dig. It laughs at cold that would kill a potato in its bed. It is not troubled by blight, that curse that can turn a whole potato patch to black slime in a wet summer. And the flavour is a thing most people alive today have simply never tasted, sweet and nutty and good roasted with a little butter. Your do-it-now step is a small one. This autumn or the coming spring, find one specialist nursery online and order a single skirret plant, no more. From that one plant, split and replanted, you can have a lifelong supply for the price of a fancy coffee. One plant and you never buy it again. But skirret is only the gentle start, because the next root on my list is a jewel-coloured tuber from the far side of the world, and it solves the one problem that ruins more potato harvests than any other. That is next. Number 4 is ochre, sometimes called the New Zealand yam, though it did not begin its life there at all. It came down from the high Andes of South America, where it has fed people in the mountains for thousands of years, second only to the potato itself in those cold, thin-aired fields. It arrived in New Zealand in the 1860s and took to the place so well that the New Zealanders claimed it as their own. The tubers are little knobbly fingers, and they come in colours that will stop you in your tracks: deep rose pink, warm apricot, sunset red, cream streaked with purple. So why does no one here grow it? Because it needs a long autumn, and most gardeners give up on it too soon and never find out how easy it truly is. Here is how ochre beats the potato, and it is the big one: blight. That black rot that haunts every potato grower in a damp summer simply does not touch ochre. It is not the same family, so the disease has no interest in it. While your neighbours are watching their potato tops collapse into slime, your ochre sits there green and untroubled. It asks for almost nothing. Poor soil, a bit of neglect, a forgotten corner, and it still gives you a crop. You plant a few tubers in the spring. You leave the plant well alone all summer, and then the magic happens after the autumn equinox, when the shortening days tell it to swell its roots fast and hard, right up until the first frost cuts the leaves down. Then you dig, and you find far more than you buried. And ochre keeps a secret that potatoes cannot match. You can leave the tubers on a sunny windowsill for a week or two after lifting, and they turn sweeter as they sit, the sharpness mellowing into something like a sweet, tangy new potato. There is more. Ochre hides no green poison the way a potato does when it sees the light, so there is nothing to peel away in fear and nothing to fret over. You can eat the little tubers, skin and all, boiled, roasted, or raw and crisp in the hand, a whole crop, and not one anxious moment about what is safe. Your do-it-now step is this. Mark your calendar for the coming spring and set aside 1 square yard of ground you are not using for anything. Ochre does not need your best bed. It thrives where the potato would sulk. And whatever you do, don't lift it early in a panic, because the whole harvest is made in those last few weeks of autumn. But if ochre is generous, the next crop is greedy in the best possible way, a plant that can hand you great heavy roots the very first year you grow it. That is coming up. Number 3 is yarkin, and this one will genuinely make you laugh the first time you dig it up, because you will not believe how much a single plant can give you. Yarkin is another traveller down from the Andes, a tall, handsome, leafy thing that looks a little like a sunflower gone soft. Beneath it, though, sit great tubers the size of a good sweet potato, sometimes bigger, and a big healthy plant will give you a real armful of them from one growing season. So why does almost no one grow it? Because it looks tropical and exotic, and people assume it must be difficult and tender and fussy, when the truth is it will grow happily in an ordinary garden and reward you like nothing else for the space. Here is how it beats the potato. Yield and speed, and the strangest, most delightful thing of all. A yarkin tuber is not starchy like a potato. It is sweet and crisp and juicy, closer to a crunchy pear or a water chestnut than to any root you know, lovely eaten raw and cold, sliced into a salad on a hot day. It stores that sweetness with a fibre that is kind to your gut, and it is prolific in a way that shames a potato bed, all that harvest from a single plant, in a single year, with barely any tending. You do not spray it, you do not hill it, you plant it, you water it in a dry spell, and you wait. Think of the sums for a moment. A single yarkin crown might cost you $15 or $20 from a nursery. And from that 1 crown, in 1 summer, you can lift more sweet crisp tubers than you would carry home in 2 hands from the shop for far more money than that. Your do-it-now step is to think about where you will get one. Yarkin is grown from a growth crown, and a good nursery will sell you a starter piece. And here is the lovely part, the same trick as skirret. When you dig your plant in the autumn, you save the knobbly crown at the top, keep it frost-free over winter in a bit of old compost, and that is next year's plant for nothing. Buy once, grow forever. And whatever you do, don't throw that crown on the compost heap by mistake, because you would be tossing away next year's whole harvest. Now, we are getting near the top of the list, and I have not forgotten the promise I made you at the very start, the 1 crop to grow if the world falls apart. We are almost there. But before it, there is a native root that does something none of the others can do. It feeds the soil while it feeds you. That is next. Number 2 is the groundnut, and I do not mean the peanut, so put that out of your mind. This is Arpios americana, a climbing perennial vine native to the woodlands and riverbanks of North America, and it is one of the great forgotten foods of that whole continent. The first peoples of America dug these tubers for countless generations. When the earliest settlers were starving through their first brutal winters, it was often the humble groundnut, shown to them by the native people, that kept them alive. It grew wild, it stored itself in the ground, and it never once let them down. So why does no one grow it now? Because the moment reliable farmed potatoes and grain took hold, A slow-growing wild vine that took a season or two to bulk up was simply cast aside as too much bother. Here is how it beats the potato, and it is remarkable. The groundnut is a legume, a cousin of the pea and the bean, which means it fixes nitrogen straight out of the air and feeds it into the soil through its roots. Grow it, and you are not stripping your ground bare the way a hungry potato crop does. You are actually enriching it. And the tuber itself is no ordinary root. It carries far more protein than a potato, 3 times as much by some measures, which for a plant you dig out of the dirt is close to miraculous. It is a true perennial, hardy and tough, and once it settles into a spot it comes back on its own, year upon year, sending its little strings of tubers along under the soil like beads on a necklace. Picture that for a moment. A plant that feeds you, that feeds the very ground it grows in, and that never once asks to be sown again. That is the kind of wisdom the old ways had, and we were in a great hurry to throw it out. Your do-it-now step is to pick its place with care, because it is a climber, and it will want something to scramble up, a fence, a trellis, an old bit of netting. Give it that, plant a few tubers, and let it establish. And whatever you do, don't grow it right up against a wall you treasure, because a happy groundnut spreads with real enthusiasm. Now, the moment has come. Everything so far has been better than a potato in one way or another, sweeter, tougher, hardier, kinder to the soil. But number 1 is on another level entirely, and it is the reason gardeners speak of the end of the world. Here it is. Number 1 is the Jerusalem artichoke. And if you take only one name away from me today, let it be this one. First, forget the name, because it is a muddle. It is not from Jerusalem, and it is not an artichoke. It is a kind of sunflower, a tall, cheerful cousin of the flower you know. And the name is most likely a clumsy old twisting of the Italian word girasole, which means turning to the sun. The Americans call it the sunchoke, which is nearer the truth. It grows 10 feet tall and more, taller than a man, taller than corn and faster growing too, topped in late summer with bright yellow flowers the bees adore. And underneath, in the dark, is the reason I saved it for last. Now here is the record I promised you at the very start, and I want you to sit up for this one. 1 small bed, 3 feet by 3 feet, a single square yard of ordinary ground, planted with just 10 small tubers, and about 10 to 12 plants came up from them. From that 1 square yard, the harvest came in at close to 21 pounds of tubers, 20 pounds of food, from a patch of ground you could cover with a bath towel, from 10 little tubers you could hold in one hand. That is why folk call it the one crop to grow in case of the apocalypse, the plant to have in the ground if the trucks ever stop coming. And it does it while asking almost nothing of you. It is hardy right through the cold, happy in zones 3 through 9, and here is the thing that truly leaves the potato behind. You do not need a shed, you do not need boxes of sand or a cool dark store. The tubers stay perfectly well in the frozen ground all winter long, and you go out and dig them up as you want them, fresh, in January, in February, whenever the pot needs filling. It suffers hardly any disease, none of the blight that plagues the potato, and the dreaded potato beetle simply ignores it. And it behaves like a perennial, because you can never quite dig every last tuber, so a few always stay behind, and it comes roaring back on its own the very next spring, with the merest effort from you. It even grows well in poor soil, though it does best in full sun, and being so tall it can flop, so give it its own bed or a big strong container to itself. This is not just an old gardener's tall tale, by the way. The Royal Horticultural Society lists it plainly as one of the easiest and most productive vegetables you can grow, and confirms that the tubers are best left in the soil and lifted only as needed. Your grandparents would have known it by feel, and the finest gardening body in the land now confirms every word. The taste is a quiet delight, slightly sweet, nutty, with a savoury depth, wonderful roasted, blended into a silky winter soup, or grated raw into a salad. One honest word of warning, because I will always give you the whole truth. It is rich in a fibre called inulin, which is a marvellous thing for the health of your gut, but which can, shall we say, produce a bit of wind, so much so that some cheeky souls call it the fartichoke. But there is an old remedy for that too. Harvest the tubers after a few hard frosts have sweetened them, And if you ferment a batch like a sauerkraut or a kimchi, the trouble all but vanishes. Your do it now step is the cheapest entry ticket in this whole video. At the tail end of winter, buy a small handful of tubers, no more than 10, for a few dollars, and plant them 6 inches deep and 18 inches apart in a bed of their own. That single handful, once it is in, will feed you and your family for the rest of your days. Plant it once, dig it forever. Now let me tell you why you never heard of a single one of these. Because it is not an accident, and it is not your fault. Somewhere across the last 100 years or so, the whole business of food narrowed down to a handful of crops. Not because they were the best, but because they were the most convenient to sell. The supermarkets and the big seed catalogues settled on the roots that ship well, that store the same, that look identical in a plastic bag on a shelf in March. A potato travels, a potato stacks. A yarkan bruises, a skirret does not keep in a warehouse, a groundnut takes its own sweet time. So the wonderful crops that did not suit the lorry and the loading bay were simply dropped, one by one, until nobody thought to ask for them. It was not a conspiracy against you. It was just money, plain and simple, the quiet arithmetic of what is easy to sell. But the cost of that arithmetic was paid in forgotten knowledge, in a whole shelf of foods your great-grandparents grew without a second thought, gone from the catalogues in a generation. You were never taught these names. That is not on you. You were sold a shorter list and told it was the whole story. And that, my friend, is really what this is about. It was never only about a bigger dinner or a fuller shed, though you will have both. It is about being a person who is not entirely at the mercy of the shelf and the lorry and the price at the till. Plant one of these, just one, and you become someone who grows food that comes back on its own, that keeps itself in the ground, that feeds the soil and asks for almost nothing in return. That is a small kind of freedom, and it is a real one. If the world ever does get strange, and it does now and then, you will be the one in the street with roots in the ground and food in the frost. That is not doom. That is quiet independence, the very thing your grandparents had and never thought to name. So let me leave you with 2 questions, and I would love it if you dropped the answers in the comments below. First, which of these 5 roots are you going to try? The skirret, the ochre, the yarkon, the groundnut, or the mighty Jerusalem artichoke? And second, tell me, did your own parents or grandparents grow anything the shops have since forgotten? Some old root or bean that never comes up anymore? I read as many of your comments as I possibly can, and the old names you share never cease to amaze me. Thank you for spending this time with me today. It means a great deal. Look after yourselves. And do come back next time, because I am going to show you 5 fruit trees that will feed you for 50 years from a single planting, and there is one among them that most people rip out as a useless weed, never knowing it drops a small fortune of fruit at their feet every single autumn. That one will surprise you. Until then, look after yourselves.